For nearly 20 years, our favorite heroes were brooding, broken, and bloodied. They lived in nigh dystopian realities where everything seemed hopeless and they were the only source of light. From Gotham to Gallifrey, Hollywood insisted to be taken seriously. Your story needed to have weight, it needed to be dark, and it needed to be brooding. But now, feels like something shifted. But why? Let's rewind. It's 1997. The Spice Girls have made their US debut, and Titanic is dominating the box office. Unfortunately, for fans of the Cape Crusader, Batman and Robin has also hit theaters, but it bombed. Audiences mocked the neon armor, the constant toy commercial, the puns, the cartoon logic. For Warner Brothers, it was a wake up call. Batman was no longer cool. Worse, he was a joke, and not in an Adam West kind of way. The hero who once dominated pop culture had become stagnant and unfortunately irrelevant. Post Batman and Robin, studios saw camp as a threat. The new rule: heroes had to be realistic, reflect the times, serious, gritty, brooding. So when a little known up and coming director named Christopher Nolan pitched Batman Begins in 2003 as a grounded psychological drama, it wasn't just bold, it was necessary. It was revolutionary. The franchise was broken, and realism seemed to be the cure. Batman Begins didn't just resurrect Batman, though, it reshaped the genre as a whole. No camp, no fantasy logic. Real world threats, corruption, terrorism, fear. A hero molded by trauma and vengeance, not destiny or prophecy. And the reality is, it worked. Fans and critics alike loved it. Fans praised it. Studios, they took notes. Suddenly, everyone wanted their slice of the pie. Everyone wanted their Batman Begins. The gritty reboot became the gold standard. Over the next decade, we got Casino Royale, the Bond reboot, Star Trek with war trauma and moral ambiguity to be found, and Man of Steel, a somber Superman facing 9/11 scale destruction. Even characters that didn't need to be serious were pushed into grayer, grittier territories. See, the dark and gritty wave didn't come out of nowhere, though. By the time the late 90s rolled around, we were heading quickly into the age of postmodernism. And by the 2000s, the world was reeling from real pain and tragedy. To understand why this trend took hold, we have to look beyond the theaters at the world itself. The early 2000s saw the trauma of 9/11, followed by 2 decades of war, economic recession, rising inequality, and the explosion of political distrust. In times like these, we don't always want idealism. We want realism, or at least something that feels honest about the messy life that we have in front of us. Heroes like Batman in Nolan's trilogy, Logan, Tony Stark, or even Matt Murdock weren't beacons in the darkness. They were products of it. Their pain made them relatable. Their violence felt justified. Their moral ambiguity mirrored our own uncertainty. Psychologically, these heroes validated what a lot of us were going through: grief, disillusionment, trauma, distrust in institutions. They made us feel less alone in a chaotic world. The age of invincibility was shattered. Suddenly, the biggest threats weren't aliens or robots. They were real people, real bombs, real consequences. Richard Dreyer's theory of utopian entertainment says stories offer what real life lacks: hope in hopeless times. But in post 9/11 Hollywood, audiences didn't want utopia, they wanted catharsis. Enter grounded heroes who confront terror, corruption, and moral decay. The Joker was an agent of chaos with terroristic tactics. Zod was leveling cities in a display of cosmic warfare. Skyfall's Bond losing his edge in a world that no longer needs him. These stories processed our collective anxiety and sought to give us something tangible to hold on to. They sought to give us control. Heroes suffered like we did, but they won, and that mattered. Heroes were not the bastions of light in the darkness. They simply moved through it and tried not to be consumed by it. By 2014, the trend had peaked. Everything was dark. Spider Man was sad. Superman snapped necks. Transformers tried to be edgy. Even Power Rangers got serious. Some franchises, like The Dark Knight, thrived in the space. Others, like Fantastic Four, depending on who you ask, Spider Man, depending on who you ask, Superman, collapsed under the weight of a borrowed tone. Not every character fits into the mold of the brooding anti hero, and not every story needs to reflect the worst parts of our world. And this is something that audiences started to take notice in. See, cynicism can only carry us so far. After a while, darkness becomes exhausting. We're not just angry anymore, we're anxious. We're overwhelmed by information. We constantly see sources of conflict by an endless stream of global crises and an endless stream of news broadcasts. And when every story reminds us how broken the world is, we begin to ask, what's the point? Where's the way forward? And that's why the reemergence of hopeful heroes doesn't feel like a step backwards into the past. It doesn't feel like we are regressing into a time that seems impossible to recapture. It feels like an evolution. In psychology, this is known as post traumatic growth, the ability to rebuild, to grow stronger and wiser after pain. We're no longer content just to watch characters struggle. We want to see them heal. We want to see what redemption looks like. We want to see what community can do, what love, sacrificial, courageous love might actually change. Around this time, Marvel began to quietly shift the tone. Iron Man was snarky and self aware. Thor embraced color, absurdity, and joy. Guardians of the Galaxy gave us a dancing tree and a talking raccoon. It wasn't just comedy, it was permission to feel okay again. Now, after decades of dystopia and anti heroes, it feels like we're entering a new phase, one shaped not by tragedy, but by exhaustion. Political division has become overwhelming. Social media has turned everything into a war of words. It feels like we cannot disagree with each other anymore. That if you disagree, then you are fundamentally wrong and you are some name that will get lobbed at another person from behind the anonymity of a keyboard. There is widespread economic instability, AI panic and anxiety, climate dread is even rising. The world still feels broken. But this time, audiences aren't asking for gritty realism, they're asking for hope. Today's audiences crave heroes who see through the noise, not just ones who rage against the machine. Heroes who refuse to become cynical. Heroes who choose kindness without irony. Heroes who rise above the systems that failed them without becoming villains themselves. We want people to aspire to that are not consumed by the darkness. Enter Superman. James Gunn's Superman succeeds not because it denies pain, but because it dares to answer it with compassion. Clark Kent in this version isn't naive, he's grounded. He's resolute in his moral stance. He sees the world's darkness, but chooses to believe it's not the whole story. He's strong, but not because he punches the hardest. He's strong because he still cares when it's easier not to. This Superman speaks to a cultural longing for leaders who don't manipulate, for strength that serves instead of dominates, for belief in people even when they fall short. Philosophically, it's a return to virtue ethics, where the hero isn't just defined by their victories, but by their character. In a world that often rewards power over principle, Superman reminds us that the power is measured in restraint and mercy and hope. Now, it doesn't mean that we're done with serious stories, and it doesn't mean that Superman is the sum total of this idea. If anything, my sincere hope is that we are going to see this film as the door opening to a new day in storytelling, that we continue to see this reflection grow of a different era of storytelling that reflects a deep seated need for hope in our world. It means we're redefining strength. Strength isn't brooding, strength isn't detachment. Strength is hope under pressure, it's empathy in the fire. As AI dehumanizes art and tribalism crushes nuance, tomorrow's heroes might not punch bad guys. They might remind us what it means to be human again. And Superman isn't alone. We see the tide turning elsewhere. In Spider Man Across the Spider Verse, Miles Morales wrestles with fate, but ultimately chooses agency and compassion. In Ted Lasso, vulnerability, forgiveness, and belief in people are front and center. In Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, healing generational trauma becomes the emotional climax, not conquest. These stories are modern myths, and like all good myths, they reflect the soul of the culture telling them. They show us who we are, but more importantly, who we're trying to become. Hopeful storytelling doesn't ignore evil, it responds to it. When the world feels out of control, it is tempting to retreat into irony and nihilism. It is easy to tell a story about how bad everything is. And at one point in time, that was the catharsis. But society changes, and we need to accept that our storytelling changes along with it. So rather than jumping on the bandwagon to say, oh, it's not like how it used to be, it's not like how it was back whenever, it doesn't sound the same, it doesn't have the grit and the darkness. Okay, there's a whole era of that storytelling just for you, if that is your bag. But we open the door to a brighter tomorrow. When the world feels like there's no hope, hope is the harder choice. It asks us to imagine something better and then live toward it. That's why hopeful heroes matter. That's why hopeful stories matter. They offer more than comfort, they offer vision for a brighter tomorrow. They show us that resilience isn't just surviving the storm, but building something beautiful in the midst of it. That justice isn't just punishment, but restoration. That power can serve love, not just serve self. And when these stories resonate, when we show up for them, it's because part of us still believes, part of us still hopes. The shift isn't witnessing the death of complex heroes, it's the return of complexity with purpose. We're no longer satisfied with watching heroes suffer for the sake of watching heroes suffer. We want to see what they'll do with the scars. We want real heroes that build something beyond what they've endured. And maybe that's what defines this new era of storytelling. Not optimism without pain, but hope that's born from it. We've seen the dark. We've told the stories that sit in grief. Now we're ready to rise. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most heroic thing that we can do. The gritty age gave us something powerful. It responded to the deep pain that was real. We were looking to other worlds, other universes, other species to find the thing that goes bump in the night. We were looking to the supernatural to explain dread and fear when we were violently made aware that humans are plenty capable in evil for themselves. But it's time that we move forward. It's time that we believe again. And I believe that we want to believe again. Not in perfect people, but in heroes that face the dark and still choose to shine. In a world that maybe isn't so divided. In a society that can choose cohabitation. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's always been the point. That our heroes reflect what we need and what we hope for. So let's hope without throwing a label on it because it doesn't look like how we think it should look like. We accept that a new day has dawned and we move forward together.